Hey everyone, welcome to Locked on Lakers for Monday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky, JJ Redick says the Lakers are going to lean into player development. What exactly does that mean? That's next.
You are Locked on Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked on Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one's always free and never behind a paywall. Locked on Lakers on YouTube is where over 24,000 subscribers are going to hang out to watch the show and talk to each other and talk to us. Please leave us questions. Please leave us comments. We do read them every day, and they, even if we don't use them, Andy, specifically shouting people out, calling people out by name. They often do give us some inspiration of things to talk about. So we really do appreciate you doing that. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Summertime, Andy, is a player development time, with Summer League going on and all of those things. Not surprising to hear JJ Redick talking about it in it was Friday's game, correct?
Yes.
The ESPN broadcast talking with Mark Jones and Doris Burke. JJ Redick interviewed there, got into the whole player development thing, had some interesting things to say, I thought.
Yeah, he talked about it being an emphasis for the program, something that they're looking to do. And just frankly, the idea of the Lakers focusing on it at all or talking about it at all. I mean, sometimes I think player development gets thought about a little bit too narrowly, like it's only for rookies or second-year players and everybody else is beyond development. When we've heard guys like Rui Hachimura and Austin Reeves, Jared Vanderbilt, get talked about as members of a young core, it's important to remember those guys are 26 and under. So they're not even quite yet in what would be defined as their prime. So I imagine those guys are thought about along those lines as well, in addition to people like Jalen Hood-Schifino and Dalton Knecht and Bronny James, Maxwell Lewis, who would be much more obvious candidates. Like the guys that I don't think about would be LeBron, AD, D'Lo. That's basically it. Like you would look to refine maybe certain things that, even LeBron and AD do, or, AD, the outside shot a little bit, or certain things with D'Lo. But those guys have been in the league now, I believe, like 10 plus years. Like at that point, you don't think of them as development guys.
No, I think LeBron, for example, is pretty well developed. Even with Anthony Davis, there are certain aspects. It's not even so much developing the skill set, but exercising different ways of using it. Even that, and I don't know if people rightly would call that player development, but it's important. But I agree with you. Everybody else, and we'll get into some of the younger guys and all that, but like everybody else basically fits into that category in one way or another. I mean, there are skills and things and there's a lot of learning that even still guys like Vanderbilt and Rui and all that can do, especially as they play larger roles. I mean, in theory with the Lakers, Rui's playing a bigger, more significant role. If he can improve a couple small things that he doesn't do well, skill development on defense and stuff like that, it makes a significant difference in how he can be used and how much he can be used. And that's a big deal for Redick and what becomes of this staff.
Yeah, and Redick has talked a lot about, wanting to involve Austin Reeves. He seems very excited at the prospect of doing more with Reeves than I guess he's seen over Austin's time under either Frank Vogel or Darvin Ham, and maybe just utilizing his skill sets in ways that haven't been done in the past, as well as developing new things or strengthening some of the things that he thinks Austin does well, shoring up some of the weaknesses. But Austin's name has come up a lot.
Yeah.
And then, he he talked about the topic came up as they were talking about Bronny James in the summer league, and Redick talked about Bronny as, quote, case study number one in terms of player development priority, which I'm not going to lie, if it's being literal, that sounds like misallocated resources. Like if we're going to be going young guys, I'd like to think Dalton Knecht would be a little bit of the lottery guy.
He's older. He's not that much older.
You know what's funny though is you look at some of the guys on the list and you realize like Dalton Knecht is not that much younger than Jared Vanderbilt. He's basically like a year younger. They're like a year and change just because he's an older rookie.
Right. I mean, he's 2 years older than Max Christie. He's 2 years old, something more, even more than that, older than Christie, older than Hood Schifino and all that. So like, he is an older rookie, especially you just don't see that much in today's NBA. I took the comment about Bronny to be like, when you said like you think about like people think about it narrowly as to what player development means. I took that comment to be, when you look at it in that narrow way, like when you think of a player that, we are going to incubate and, work with, who we don't expect to be a significant contributor now, but we believe can be one in the future. That's what I think, that's that slot of player development that I think people often focus on. And in that sense, Bronny is exactly that guy. Well, I think, because he isn't going to contribute this year, he's probably not going to contribute much next year, but the hope is 2 or 3 or 4 years down the line, certainly by the 4th year, I think, that you have a guy who can play a role on an NBA team. And so that, I think I wasn't alarmed by it. I'm not saying you were either, but that's how I interpret it, as when you think of classic player development, of prospect development, a guy who, if this was if Major League Baseball, would be in the minor leagues, and Bronny's going to spend the entire year in the G League, basically. We're talking about that. I agree with you. That is not the only way that player development is going to happen on this roster.
Well, I mean, that's why I said if you took it literally, which I probably wouldn't. If I'm being frank about it, I think it is part of the Lakers going out of their way to play up Bronny as a prospect they are excited about. An extension of when JJ Redick, I think, rather unprompted, went out of his way to emphasize that Bronny has been given nothing and has earned every single opportunity in front of him, which, I mean, I don't say this to take away from Bronny in the sense that I know he's worked, but if we're being honest, that is kabuki theater. And everybody knows this has not been 100% earned independent of LeBron's name. But, it is really, I think, just most interesting, just hearing the Lakers talk more and message more and signal more the idea of long view, period, because they've always, particularly in the post Dr. Buss era, they have seemed to put this emphasis on always being ready-made in ways that I think has hurt them a lot, and seemingly looking to skip certain steps of building and like understanding that, JJ Redick had an interesting comment about, this was also in terms of the expectations on Bronny, but like the idea that it's not about expectations, but rather having standards for yourself. And, that the expectation would just be to put in the work. And I thought that was good advice for Bronny, just because there is a ton of pressure on him, but also too, just the idea that the Lakers, they can't always have championship be the expectation against which they judge themselves, because that will again lead to that temptation of skipping steps. It can be a standard that you are always looking to get closer to and build towards. It should be, but you need to make sure that you are always doing that in a way that feels like you are actually building towards it, as opposed to trying to just put yourself as close to it as possible cosmetically, even if you're really not.
I
I agree with you, but I want to. There's another aspect of that I want to get into next, and then we'll obviously talk a little bit about summer league and who needs to be developed in what way based on what we're seeing so far. So all that coming up.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. We all love sports. We love them so much, we never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. Same with you. All you got to do is just open the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And you got options, folks. You got baseball, you got WNBA. According to many WNBA pundits, Angel Reese has taken the lead over Caitlin Clark for Rookie of the Year. You agree? Do you disagree? You think that'll hold? Maybe you want to get a little bit ahead of that action. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. Something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Quick reminder to everybody, there are over 200 shows on the Locked On Network. Andy and I, we always love when everybody makes this their first listen of every day. We use the network. It is a great resource for catching up on, you need a scouting report on another team. All these other things, like when Tennessee, let's say we draft a college basketball player from Tennessee, going to check out what's going on over there to find out who this guy is. So, things like that. I've used it a lot this offseason to see what other teams in the Western Conference, Locked On Thunder, Locked On Clippers, are saying about their teams and their off seasons. Another great way to engage with the network. So yeah, take advantage of it. 200 shows plus that you can dive into based on your interests. Andy, you were kind of talking about the ways in which the Lakers look at player development and sometimes sort of ignoring it to the exclusion of having this appearance of ready-madeness as if the idea that you have to work on growing players and growing from within is antithetical to having a championship-ready roster. And I think what we're learning, particularly as the CBA continues to evolve and continues to become more restrictive, is that it's actually a primary ingredient for developing and trying to sustain a championship or high playoff championship contender type roster. If you can't do that, if you can't find guys who can perform like $25 million players while they're making 12, or perform like $45 million players while they're making 28 or something, you can't keep a roster together. And so player development is more than now, I think, in the today's NBA, something that you do to try and build a winning franchise and a winning culture. It's something you have to do to have one. Like I don't know if we can separate the two anymore.
I mean, I think it's similar conceptually to the way you always hear about NFL teams looking to build as much as they can around a young, very good quarterback before that quarterback becomes too expensive. And then all of a sudden the team may suffer in the process because you can't put as many pieces around that quarterback as you need to, because the quarterback is all of a sudden making $60 million a season. So it's the same basic concept, but in theory, if you handle this stuff smart and you look ahead and you become strategic about it, you can put pieces around that young quarterback where you can really try to cash in on their talents and some of the other players around them before eventually that player ends up with a payday. And the 2020 championship Lakers were something of a mercenary squad, led by LeBron and AD. Neither one of them were drafted Lakers, or they'd spent several years with other teams. It can be done. The 2019 Raptors were kind of like that, but for the most part, that's the exception and not the rule. Yeah. Most championship teams have at least one player that was either drafted by that organization or, for all intents and purposes, feels like their guy. it's pretty unusual, I think, because in a lot of ways of salary constraints to organize mercenary teams like that, and it's only going to become more difficult moving forward.
And one of the things, and we'll go back to Bronny here in a minute, but one of the things that I thought was that I think is interesting about the new CBA, and we're all trying to figure out like how is this going to make it. I mean, if we're doing it, certainly NBA executives are, and I don't think there's any real handle yet on what this is going to look like. Is it too restrictive? Is it not? What are they going to try to relax and other things? I think some tweaks could come. But one of the things I wonder about is whether or not the general dislike of drafting older rookies, like a guy like Knecht, might start to shift a little bit, because the problem with drafting 19-year-olds or 20-year-olds, guys who've been in the league, you often have to make a decision about extending them before you know what they are. And that decision can be, sometimes you get lucky, a guy lands in a sweet spot, everybody's happy with 14 million for the next 3 years or whatever. But sometimes the guy's producing level, you're not sure if they're the man, but you got to pay him like that. Or you might have to cut bait on a player before you really want to. If you can get a better feel for how competitive a guy is at the NBA level, then there may be some real advantage to doing that quickly and being able to slot a guy into a number that is going to make sense, that is not going to be dead money for you. So yeah, okay, maybe Dalton Knecht isn't going to be a perennial all-star in the league, but when his contract comes up in 3 or 4 years or whatever it is, 5 years, and the Lakers have to make a choice about him, they can probably do that with far more understanding of his value to their roster and to their rotation, and have a number in mind that they're comfortable with, in ways that they even with somebody like Max Christie, like I think 8 and 32, or 4 and 32, 8 million a year is a pretty decent number for him, but it's not without risk. So, and then you look at what Knecht did on Friday.
I was just about to say,
yeah, I feel like Friday was the day that the first 3 games of Summer League, or first 2, was it first 3 or first 2? I forget.
3, there were 3 Cali Classic games.
And like where Knecht, put up some decent numbers toward the end, but like you could see what it was, but like the shot wasn't going down. Now you saw on Friday what it looked like when the shot goes down, because I think he's pretty complete player, at least on one half of the floor.
Yeah, Friday in that loss to the Rockets, Dalton Knecht looked really, really good offensively. 25 points on 9 of 18 from the field, 5 of 11 from behind the arc, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. Like his playmaking actually has been something that has been, I think, pretty consistently impressive and fun to watch. Like this was a game where you saw him throw hit-aheads, you saw him set up guys for lobs, you saw him moving the ball really well, skip passes. He again keeps moving inside, like attacking the basket. But there was a really fun sequence where sideline out of bounds play. Knecht was the inbounder, and then he immediately got a dribble handoff back from Castleton, spaced himself out, got a 3. The defense is still a work in progress. We were told ahead of time, and even the most optimistic, I think, of people with Dalton Knecht, or people who saw some potential, acknowledged this was going to take some work. And I got to be honest, there are times when I've watched him where it doesn't even seem like it's indifference or apathy or whatever. I think he reacts slow to things. Like he does not, to me so far, anticipate well defensively, and that's going to be especially something at the NBA level that I think is going to take reps and coaching and film work and scouting and all that stuff. But offensively, as this has gone along, we're seeing more and more signs of a guy that really might have a lot in his bag, and that I think if he can either improve his defense enough to neutral-ish, or find units around him that can protect him enough, I think there's stuff he can do in the regular season that could be really useful.
Yeah, I think he's going to play. I mean, look, Taurean Prince is gone. And while Max Christie, I think, is definitely going, signed a contract, and now he's going to be on the floor. If nothing else, like you're paying him, like you're not paying the guy $8 million a year to
They
sit.
expect him to play,
and they don't want him to, and they need him to play. But there is a hole in the rotation that is created by Taurean Prince going to Milwaukee, and so Knecht is going to play, and they drafted him with the idea that he was going to play and with a skill set that should work with what JJ Redick does. A lot of movement, and he will be constantly running, constantly in motion, and this is a role that he knows how to do, and he knows how to not just catch and shoot or catch and put the ball on the floor, but I think he's shown over the course of Summer League that he's pretty good at catching and making the read on the next pass.
Yeah,
coming off the screen, with the ball in his hands and making the right pass and things like that. And so I realize the shooting numbers aren't great uniformly through the 4 games, but I have been very pleased with because I'm anticipating, like, what does this look like when it's next to LeBron and AD? And even defensively, what does it look like when he's playing with better defenders than you get in the Summer League? And granted, against better offensive players, but with more cohesion and more professional defenders.
Yeah,
I think he will be protected a little bit better. We'll see. Like through the preseason, he's gonna be somebody. This is not hot takery, I think, or really the most original thought, but he's going to be somebody people are going to be watching very closely through the preseason to see exactly what kind of role he's going to get from the jump in the rotation. I think they are hoping that he's certainly ready for a 15-minute role a night at the very least when they start games.
Well, I mean, we'll see more signs of it tonight. The Lakers play another game in Summer League. We're also going to see more of Bronny, who definitely, I think, would like to redeem himself after Friday, because we'll talk about it, that was frankly a mess. So
wasn't good. That's next.
Next. Locked On Lakers is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's what brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whatever you're into, speed, power, style, all of the above, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what it is you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers.
I mentioned that Dalton Knecht's numbers weren't great. Like, you're expecting this guy to come in and shoot, big numbers and all that kind of stuff. And he did. And again, a good game on Friday and some other good moments. But Bronny James has not shot the ball well at all in this. When he's shot it, which isn't all that often. Friday was the first game he really, I think, sort of opened up offensively, and the results were poor, to say the least. Are you surprised, though, by any of this? Like, to go back to our development conversation that we're having in that first segment, are you at all surprised at what we're seeing from Bronny in this summer league?
No, in the sense that the scouting on him was largely that the defense was ahead of the offense, and he has been, I think, for the most part, pretty solid defensively, and at times actually quite impressive. The third game, I believe it was the third game of the Cali Classic, I thought Bronny's defense was extremely good.
Yeah.
But his offense being behind the defense isn't necessarily a surprise, but I don't know if surprise is the word I would use for what I'm about to mention, but I'm starting to find him offensively confusing. Because it's not even just that this was a horrible game as far as shooting for Bronny. He had 8 points on 3 of 14 from the field, 0 of 8 from behind the arc, and there were a lot of bad misses, wide open, like airballed, at least one of them. He had 5 rebounds, but no assists against 3 turnovers. And in watching Bronny, I recognize it is early. He is a project. He is still someone that needs a ton of seasoning. There's a long view, all of that. But I'm very confused as to what his offensive, forget just future is, like what is his role offensively? Because he does not handle the ball a lot for somebody that would be a point guard. And, he's made a few decent facilitating plays, but I have not been.
No, I feel like he's much better with the ball, making decisions like in open floor play and transition and stuff. He actually has made a lot of nice plays in that context. But yes, I agree with you. And then, as a primary ball handler.
And then if he's a scorer, honestly, he doesn't seem that comfortable. Like if he was supposed to be a very undersized 2-guard, he does not seem, forget proficiency with scoring. He doesn't seem all that comfortable looking to score. And like his defense, again, I think has been good. And there's been a lot of promise there. And it's something that could be his calling card. But unless he figures out even like the poor man's version of what he is offensively, he's going to have to be like 97th elite, percentile elite in order just to find a role in the NBA defensively.
I think
because he's undersized.
He is. And I think what Bronny James really is a tiny small forward. He's just a really undersized small forward. We joke about it sometimes. I do think there is at least some back of the mind hope that he might grow an inch or two before he's done. Like he is young enough where he could still grow a little bit.
I don't think anybody should count on that, but he is young enough where that, 6'1.5", 6'2", or whatever he is, could become 6'3", 6'3". And given his length, his reach, that would actually be a significant difference. He is not a point guard. He's point guard height. Right. He is not a shooting guard because he doesn't shoot very well. Or score very well either.
Right. He's not a polished offensive player. The scouting report, like you say, is exactly right. The size mismatch of what he is, I think, is pretty spot on. And I think it explains as much as anything, beyond even the heart trouble and all these other things that he went through this year, why as a prospect, he wasn't, even when things were really high, there were a lot of people really, he wasn't top 10, he was top 30. Like there's a difference, and the reason is, and I think people probably thought maybe coming out of high school was a little bit more of a polished offensive product, but I think that size thing is why it's hard to figure out exactly what he is. And what you hope is, I think, that they can develop him. Go back to that conversation that, the development of Bronny James as an offensive player can get him to a point where he does something well, one or two things really well, so that he can be, because I think he actually does. He's going to get stronger. Even if he doesn't get taller, he's going to get stronger. He's pretty strong already for his age. And we've seen these highlights of him where he is not moved by larger players and knows how to use his body for leverage and all that. So I feel like as he continues to get stronger, if it doesn't hurt his quickness, doesn't hurt his footwork, all he needs to be, he needs to have an offensive skill that he can lean on a little bit so that he can be, I don't think he's ever going to be a 20 to 30 minute a night guy in the NBA. But to be in 15 to 25 based on that defensive profile, if he can find, that's what they sort of drafted to find out. That's what the 4-year contract is for. And that's what all this conversation about player development is about.
Yeah, it's very interesting with Bronny in particular, just because like the idea again, that I'm not sure even what the lane would be. Like contrast that with Maxwell Lewis, who continues to be extremely up and down in summer league. And side note,
I'm not writing the kid off, and I'm certainly not rooting against him, but I'm not super impressed by this number so far.
It is disconcerting to see. We've talked about this before, how second year guys are supposed to look like they are too good for Summer League. And Maxwell, forget the idea of Maxwell Lewis using Summer League to make the case for him to get regular season minutes. He is not really making the case for himself as a dominant Summer League player. But as opposed to Bronny, where I can't figure out what he is offensively, I know what Maxwell Lewis is offensively. I'm not convinced he's necessarily good at it, but I know what he is. I really, watching Bronny, it just sort of dawned on me, and maybe it was because this game had more volume from him in terms of just shot attempts. I just don't exactly know what Bronny's offensive role is after 4 games, which, again, big picture is not necessarily a red flag, right, but it is unusual. To feel this unclear about it.
I think it gets to how unusual he is as a pro. Like, we're so used to looking at guys and being like, well, if they can play defense, we'll see. Like, we don't, and I'm not talking like specifically about Bronny being like this lockdown defensive prodigy, like, you know, DPOY candidate, whatever. I'm just saying, like, that is clearly what he's good at, and it's clearly an important skill set. And just as we talk about, there are certain guys who are really good offensively, just have to figure out a way to be passable on defense. There are players who have really high defensive potential where he could guard, you know, 3 positions or something like that as he gets a little bit bigger. Where, you know, I think that people look at that for Bronny as like the high end result is a guy who can guard 1s, 2s, and 3s, and is just good enough offensively with his shot, with, you know, as a catch and shoot guy, coming off screens, whatever it is, that you have to respect him. Doesn't make bad, we'll say he doesn't make a lot of bad plays offensively. He's just not, he's clearly not at that level. Like, he doesn't do, I don't think he's a point guard. So like when you see him running an offense and things like that, maybe that's something he works on in the G League. But like the connecting, gets it, makes the connect. But he is not. You are kind of playing 4-on-5 when he's on. I mean,
I would say the biggest reason he might not make a lot of bad plays offensively is he doesn't make a lot of plays offensively.
Right,
like
he's just not involved. Right, essentially, that's what I'm saying. You're essentially kind of playing 4-on-5, and if you can find a way to turn that into something where you are playing with a limited offensive player, but one that you have to respect because of X or Y. Often that's enough if he's good enough defensively. And, you know, he's never going to have the height probably, but he does have pretty good length. And so we'll see how it goes. It's, you know, I'm pulling for him to be able to figure something out, figure out a niche. And we'll see over the course of the G League season. You know, he's going to start off averaging 6 points a game. If he can get that up to 8 or 10 or 12 or develop a consistent 3-point shot or whatever it might be. We never got to the 2024 IST draw, which happened over the weekend, and interesting result for the Lakers. Obviously leads to a larger conversation of what the heck they do with this tournament anyway. We'll get into that tomorrow. We'll keep up with any news that might happen, and obviously Monday night's Summer League game. So all of that coming up on Tuesday. Leave your questions, leave your comments. We'll see everyone tomorrow.